If she continued to remain secretive, it would inevitably be seen as pretentious. "I never intended to be mysterious," Clara Quinn said. The little assistant didn't quite understand. Not showing her face for 3 years, wasn't that being secretive? "So, boss, are you going to this banquet?" "Of course, I'm going." She might as well consider it a break, a chance to relax. Getting to know some new people might not be a bad thing, and it could be beneficial for her future work. "Where's Martin Hayes?" "Still on his business trip." Martin Hayes was her partner. For the past 3 years, she'd been the silent backer, while he was the face of the studio. He made most of the decisions, they only came to her for the truly big stuff. Calling them partners was putting it lightly, they were best friends. "He flew in last night. He'll be here this afternoon." "Good. Call him and tell him to join me tonight." She paused, then added, "Actually, I'll call him. I'll just pick him up from the airport." "Yes, ma'am." Clara Quinn hadn't seen Martin Hayes since her wedding 3 months ago. They usually only spoke on the phone. It was always a case of ships passing in the night, she'd be at the studio when he wasn't, or he'd return when she couldn't make it. Clara Quinn wore large sunglasses, the oversized lenses obscuring more than half her face, making it appear even smaller. A figure with luggage emerged from the gate, and Clara Quinn recognized him instantly. His tall frame and perfectly tailored suit made him stand out from the crowd. Clara Quinn had always said, with a look like that, who could possibly be good enough for him? Martin Hayes was a man of few words, rarely engaging in idle chatter. Her comments were usually met with a simple chuckle. Martin Hayes quickly spotted Clara Quinn waiting outside. "Hey, handsome, mind if I get your number?" Clara Quinn approached, her arm reaching out to drape over Martin Hayes' shoulder. But Martin Hayes was too tall, she couldn't quite reach. Clara Quinn, with a serious expression, beckoned Martin Hayes with her finger. He obediently leaned down, giving her the perfect height to hook her arm around his. "Good boy," Clara Quinn said, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. Despite their infrequent meetings, Clara Quinn always found it easy to joke with him. "What brings you here today?" Martin Hayes asked as they walked outside. "Missed you, of course." Clara Quinn shrugged, knowing he wouldn't buy that flimsy excuse, so she dropped the act. "There's a party tonight for the River Station Development Project. They sent me an invitation, and I figured, why not?" "You're bothering with something like this?" Martin Hayes sounded incredulous. "You're actually thinking about taking the studio seriously?" The small studio had had plenty of opportunities to expand, but Clara Quinn had never shown much interest. "Why not? Should I just keep you talented folks down in the dumps forever?" Clara Quinn retorted. "Actually, forget it. It's much easier this way, no competition, no worrying about going bankrupt. I'm going home. No party for me." Clara Quinn strode forward, but Martin Hayes grabbed the back of her collar, stopping her in her tracks. She chuckled. These friends had been with her for a long time, there was a bond of loyalty. She couldn't ignore their futures for her own comfort. With their skills, they could easily find better positions, higher salaries. "Why not go? You don't look so good. Is something bothering you?" "Nonsense. It's nothing, Martin Hayes. I think you've been a bit nosy lately." Laughing and talking. The two walked out of the station, got into the car, and didn't linger. With only a few hours left until the cocktail party, they were still considered newcomers in this circle. Although they had gained some notoriety, they couldn't be late for such a grand event, especially not on their first attendance. So, they first went to the mall to buy Clara Quinn a gown for the party, then to her friend's hair salon for a light touch-up. Time was ticking. When they arrived, the cocktail party was about to begin. It was safe to say that no one present knew Clara Quinn, but many who saw Martin Hayes came to greet him, as if encountering him in such a place was utterly unbelievable. Indeed, Martin Hayes never attended such occasions. No matter how influential the person inviting him, he always found an excuse to decline. Everyone was accustomed to this and usually extended invitations as a mere formality. Whether he came or not was an unspoken understanding, and no one minded. His unexpected appearance this time was truly beyond everyone's expectations. "Martin Hayes," a slightly dubious voice called out. After confirming it was indeed the person he'd addressed, he said with a bright smile, "What a distinguished guest. What brings you here today?" "Mr. Chen, I'm here specifically on my boss's orders." Martin Hayes, recognizing the CEO of River Station Real Estate Group, nodded politely and shook his hand. "My boss said we might not give face to everyone, but we must give face to Mr. Chen." Clara Quinn, standing behind him, thought, "When did I ever say that to him? Turns out the iceberg Martin Hayes knows how to lie, Boss Quinn." Mr. Chen chuckled, his face beaming with satisfaction. "Why don't I see Boss Quinn? Could it be they're still not giving me face? Boss Quinn is always so mysterious, let alone the person who can keep such talented individuals like you by their side. I'm truly curious." Though his words carried a hint of reproach, his tone held no resentment. After all, Martin Hayes' presence was already a considerable gesture of respect. "Mr. Chen, you wrong me with those words. I put aside all my work specifically to attend your opening ceremony." This was Clara Quinn speaking. As she spoke, she stepped out from behind Martin Hayes. She wore 8-centimeter black high heels and a black, off-the-shoulder knee-length gown. A large, crimson flower brooch adorned her chest, breaking the somberness of the black and exuding an air of dynamism and capability. Her hair, styled in large waves, framed her oval face, enhancing her radiant appearance. Mr. Chen was stunned, recalling her words, as if something had dawned on him. "Could you be?" "Hello, Mr. Chen. I'm Clara Quinn, president of Blue Sky Studio." Clara Quinn smiled, extending her hand to shake Mr. Chen's, no longer concealing her identity. Mr. Chen, pleasantly surprised, shook her hand and said, "I always imagined the boss behind the scenes to be an exceptionally capable man. I never expected such an outstanding woman leader. Seeing is truly believing. Boss Quinn has indeed given face to Mr. Chen. Mr. Martin, you're too kind. My small studio wouldn't be where it is today without those large orders you entrusted to me." As the two men chatted, a sudden commotion erupted at the entrance. Everyone turned towards the door as the crowd parted, revealing a tall man and a statuesque woman. Even from a distance, Clara Quinn recognized the man, her body stiffening, the smile vanishing from her face. Henry Young. He dared to bring someone to a public event like this. If she hadn't come tonight, would he have paraded a different woman on his arm at every turn? She, Clara Quinn, was his lawfully wedded wife. Why should she cover for him? Why should she stand silently in the shadows while he humiliated her like this? Martin Hayes sensed her sudden shift in mood and followed her gaze, his brow furrowing slightly. Chapter 22 Henry Young. You're so cruel. What was the connection between Clara Quinn and Henry Young? Clara Quinn's face was a mask of fury, her eyes burning with rage at Henry Young, as if she wanted to incinerate him. The hatred she directed at the woman beside him seemed almost annihilating. Clara Quinn clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, but she felt no pain. She forced a polite smile onto her face. She resumed her conversation with Mr. Martin, but her eyes kept flicking back to the man who commanded everyone's attention. Wherever he went, he was the center of the universe. A flicker of bitterness crossed Clara Quinn's eyes. She straightened her back. No matter what, she would face Henry Young with her head held high. She would show him who was the woman truly worthy of standing by his side. Clara Quinn's red lips curled into a mocking smile, tinged with a hint of madness, as she looked coldly at the woman beside Henry Young. "Shall we go and greet young Master Henry?" Martin Hayes glanced at Clara Quinn, remaining silent. "Do you know young Master Henry, Miss Quinn?" Mr. Martin asked curiously, his eyes darting between the two. "Know him? No one in this world knows him better than I do." Martin Hayes felt a pang of unease. Clara Quinn had always been bright and cheerful in their presence. He had never seen this dark side of her. What was the nature of her relationship with Henry Young? He took Clara Quinn's hand and slowly led her towards Henry Young and his woman. "Henry. I didn't expect you to follow me all the way here." Henry Young's first reaction upon seeing Clara Quinn was a cold smirk. One thought flashed through his mind: persistent pest CEO Young, who is this woman? The tall beauty beside Henry Young leaned against him, her ample bosom rubbing against his arm provocatively. She looked at Clara Quinn with a challenging glint in her eyes. She had finally managed to snag this prize catch, Henry Young, and she wasn't about to let anyone steal him away. "Just someone irrelevant, darling, no need to acknowledge." Henry Young pinched the beauty's chin, not even glancing at Clara Quinn, his other hand continuously caressing the woman's smooth, white skin. Witnessing this scene, Clara Quinn's body trembled, a sense of losing control rising within her. A violent impulse surged, a desire to tear the woman before her to shreds. Her carefully constructed composure shattered, leaving her on the verge of a breakdown. Acting on this impulse, Clara Quinn moved forward, but Martin Hayes, at her side, sensed something amiss and pulled her back. "Clara, what's wrong?" Martin Hayes's hand tightened around Clara Quinn's, his voice laced with concern. Had he seen it right, a flicker of madness in her eyes? He couldn't help but wonder if this Clara Quinn was truly the one he knew. "Martin Hayes, get me out of here. I don't want to stay here anymore." Clara Quinn's eyes suddenly welled up, her voice choked with emotion. All her prior resolve, her preparations for Henry Young's coldness, evaporated. She couldn't bear to let herself become so pathetic. In that moment, she clung to Martin Hayes like a lifeline. Martin Hayes said nothing, casting a glance at the still indifferent Henry Young. He grasped Clara Quinn's cold hand and, pulling her close, quickly led her away. As Clara Quinn's figure gradually disappeared, a cruel glint flashed in Henry Young's eyes. What game was Clara Quinn playing? And who was that man? When Clara Quinn had approached, Henry Young had felt only disdain. But now, seeing her fragility in Martin Hayes's arms, an inexplicable irritation gnawed at him. "Mr. Young, that man with that woman seems interested in her. And yet, she's still wrapped around your finger. Your charm is truly irresistible." The beauty playfully punched Henry Young's chest, a hint of jealousy in her gesture. "Are you jealous, Mr. Young?" The woman's voice was coquettish, oblivious to the deepening intensity in Henry Young's gaze as he watched Clara Quinn's retreating figure. The tranquility of the garden stood in stark contrast to the boisterous party. Free from the noise and commotion, Clara Quinn felt her turmoil gradually subside, though a tightness still gripped her heart. Sensing the alarming coldness of Clara Quinn's skin, Martin Hayes removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. He then offered her a cup of warm water. "Thank you," Clara Quinn murmured, her gaze unfocused. "I want to know, what is your relationship with him?" Martin Hayes's expression was calm, but his tone brooked no refusal. We're married. It's just, I forced him into it. He doesn't acknowledge it." Recalling Henry Young's disgust, a shadow of despair flickered in Clara Quinn's eyes. After all this time, he still hadn't changed his mind. "You're married?" Surprise, mingled with disappointment, coursed through Martin Hayes. Quickly masking his reaction, he said, "I'm just surprised to hear you're married. The wedding was rushed, few knew about it." The gloom in Clara Quinn's eyes deepened. The most important moment in a woman's life, for her, was the beginning of the destruction of all hope. After marriage, Henry Young's coldness drove her to madness. Whenever she encountered an issue related to Henry Young, she found herself becoming unlike herself. She hated herself like this, yet she continued to do so. A pang of heartache shot through Martin Hayes. He crouched down, involuntarily grasping Clara Quinn's hands. Divorce him. Divorce him. No, Clara Quinn instinctively replied, he can only be mine. I can't divorce him. Once divorced, he will no longer be mine. By this point, Clara Quinn's face was awash with tears, her voice growing more agitated, her body trembling violently. He doesn't love you. You won't be happy. No, he will love me, he will love me. Clara Quinn shook her head vigorously, her heart uncontrollably murmuring to itself, her expression filled with utter desolation. She wanted to give up, but she couldn't bear to. How could she abandon something she had persisted in for so long? Seeing the distraction in Clara Quinn's eyes, Martin Hayes said nothing, just sat beside her, embracing her trembling body, wanting to give her strength. Only, Martin Hayes felt that Clara Quinn's current state seemed a bit off. What are you two doing here? Martin Hayes looked up to see an incredibly handsome man standing not far away, arms crossed over his chest, watching them. The suit he wore couldn't conceal the rakish air he exuded. Glancing at him, Martin Hayes paid him no further mind. Just a boring, irrelevant person. Clara Quinn, what's wrong now? Ethan Reed? Clara Quinn's consciousness gradually returned, her unfocused gaze slowly settling on Ethan Reed. Martin Hayes's eyes darkened. Clara knew this man. Martin Hayes now began to seriously assess the man before him. Exquisitely handsome features, narrow, elongated phoenix eyes, a high, straight nose, lips of just the right thickness, smooth skin. Martin Hayes felt Ethan Reed was devilishly beautiful. Did you see Henry at the banquet? Ignoring Martin Hayes's scrutiny, Ethan Reed spoke to Clara Quinn with certainty. He really couldn't understand why Clara Quinn insisted on choosing Henry Young. If Henry Young had feelings for her, he would have nothing to say. But it was clear that Henry Young didn't care about her at all. Looking at Clara Quinn like this, Ethan Reed felt tired for her. A surge of anger rose within him. Henry simply didn't know how to cherish the love of this woman before him. Ethan Reed's heart was a bit complicated. If it were before, he would have just laughed off Henry Young's philandering, even offering him stunning beauties. But now, seeing Clara Quinn's face darken further, Ethan Reed's expression grew grim. He knew it would be like this. Let's go. Martin Hayes, beside her, suddenly pulled Clara Quinn's hand. Where are you taking me? Clara Quinn, startled by Martin Hayes's action, instinctively yanked her hand back. Ethan Reed, hearing Clara Quinn's exclamation, also grasped her other hand, leaving the three frozen in an awkward tableau. The air hung heavy with a momentary silence. Tell him straight. Martin Hayes urged. Love him fully, or let him go. No. I don't want to. Clara Quinn's immediate reaction to Martin Hayes's words was the memory of Henry Young's callous rejection. This, you must do, Martin Hayes's face hardened. With a sudden tug, he pulled Clara Quinn into the heart of the party. Seeing her self-inflicted misery, anger surged within him. He longed for the radiant girl she once was. Ethan Reed stared at his empty hand, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He had released Clara Quinn not for any personal reason, but because of Martin Hayes's words. Seeing her apparent distress, he sincerely hoped she could return to her former self. Henry Young was his good friend, he shouldn't interfere. The party had reached its peak. Dim lights bathed the dance floor where elites from all corners of society swayed, their darker impulses masked by the shadows. Henry Young and his beautiful companion danced beneath the spotlight, their bodies pressed close. The woman subtly brushed against him, and Henry Young accepted these overt advances with relish. A casual glance revealed Clara Quinn's entrance, escorted by Martin Hayes. Recalling their earlier departure, a flicker of annoyance crossed Henry Young's eyes. Seeing the sadness in Clara Quinn's gaze, a cold smile played on his lips as his hands began to wander over his dance partner. Witnessing this, Clara Quinn's fleeting flush of color drained away. She knew it was deliberate, a calculated act to humiliate her, to trample on her affections. She wrenched her hand free from Martin Hayes, snatched a glass of red wine, and strode towards the dance floor. Ack! A piercing scream shattered the festive atmosphere. Thinking something untoward had occurred, the organizers switched on the lights, exposing everything in stark illumination. Henry Young's dance partner was a disheveled mess. Her hair, soaked and plastered to her face, was a tangled ruin. The crimson stain of red wine on her dress testified to the attack she had endured. "Are you crazy?" Touching her head, Henry Young's partner stared at Clara Quinn in disbelief. How could anyone be so deranged? "No, I'm not crazy." Clara Quinn laughed coldly. "You dare seduce my man? This is the price you pay." Mr. Young, hearing Clara Quinn's words, the woman turned desperately to Henry Young, hoping for some form of vindication. "You dare bully my woman? And what price will you pay?" Looking at the woman's disheveled state, disgust flickered in Henry Young's eyes. But the thought of the woman who disgusted him even more standing before him spurred him to action. Without hesitation, he pulled the humiliated woman into his arms, his gaze fixed coldly on Clara Quinn. "Henry Young. You are so cruel." Tears welled up in Clara Quinn's eyes. A wave of discomfort washed over her, a pain so sharp it almost choked her. She was his woman, so what was she? What the hell was Clara Quinn to him? Chapter 23, Find It Yourself, Find It Yourself. Henry Young's eyes flashed with a cold light. Each word from his thin lips pierced Clara Quinn's heart like an arrow, shattering it into pieces. Oh, so this crazy woman is just infatuated with CEO Young? I thought she was his wife. The woman beside Henry Young sneered, looking at Clara Quinn with mockery. Henry Young treated her so cruelly, it seemed he had no feelings for her. If that was the case, why should she show this woman any respect? "I don't have a wife." Hearing this, the last thread of hope in Clara Quinn's heart snapped. She lunged forward, pushing the woman beside Henry Young away, and shouted at him, "What am I to you? Tell me. What am I to you?" Gently brushing Clara Quinn's hand off him, Henry Young slowly stepped back, putting some distance between them. His narrow eyes flashed with a ruthless glint. In an icy tone, he said each word deliberately, "You are to me." He pulled his girlfriend closer, placing a gentle kiss on her lips, less than her. As soon as he finished speaking, Clara Quinn suddenly lunged forward and slapped the woman beside Henry Young. The woman retaliated immediately, and the two women quickly became entangled in a messy brawl. The guests present were thoroughly entertained by the spectacle. If it weren't for the tight security at the party, tomorrow's headlines would surely be about this catfight over a man, especially since it involved Henry Young, a media darling. Henry Young stood by, coldly watching the scene unfold without any reaction. Martin Hayes, who had been observing from the sidelines, looked at Henry Young with increasing coldness. This man was too cruel. He had to find a way for Clara to divorce him. She deserved better than to be tormented like this. It was truly undeserved. Martin Hayes strode forward and pulled Clara behind him. Someone who doesn't appreciate you will always be replaced by someone who does. His gaze locked onto Henry Young, his words laced with meaning. Henry Young's entire being radiated a chilling aura of power directed at Martin Hayes. Martin Hayes met his gaze without flinching. Their eyes met, a fierce, cold light clashing in the air. It was a silent battle between two powerful men. "I've always cherished beauty, it's just that some aren't worthy." Henry Young glanced meaningfully at Clara Quinn. Seeing her body tremble, a flicker of something crossed his eyes. He knew exactly how to twist the knife in her heart. But Clara Quinn didn't react to him. Her head spun, her body weakened, and she collapsed sideways. Martin Hayes, who had been watching her closely, quickly caught her. Scooping Clara Quinn into his arms, Martin Hayes stared coldly at Henry Young. "You don't deserve her." With that, he lifted his chin and walked away. Henry Young's brows furrowed slightly, a cold snort escaping his lips. Deserve her? Ha, what right did this outsider have to say such a thing? Henry Young couldn't pinpoint the source of his anger, only a burning sensation in his chest, his mind replaying the image of Clara Quinn being carried away. CEO Young, the girlfriend from earlier, sidled up to Henry Young. Who was that woman? In truth, a flicker of fear had crossed the girlfriend's mind when she saw Clara Quinn faint. She worried about Clara Quinn's status. Lately, she'd heard whispers of several women around Henry Young meeting unfortunate ends. Coupled with Clara Quinn's frantic demeanor, it was unsettling. She clutched Henry Young's sleeve, seeking a semblance of security from the man she adored. She presented herself to me, she should bear the consequences. A cold laugh escaped Henry Young's lips, his mouth set in a hard line. He had lost all interest in the woman clinging to him, his mind preoccupied with that frantic face. That woman, wasn't she always so strong? Why did she look so haggard today? Just as he was about to leave the tedious party, Henry Young spotted a familiar figure. Ethan Reed? What was he doing here? Surprise flickered in Henry Young's eyes as he approached Ethan Reed gracefully. When did you arrive? Not long ago. Didn't expect to catch such a good show, Ethan Reed quipped, masking the worry in his eyes. She brought it on herself. Recalling the earlier scene, Henry Young's eyes turned icy. An inexplicable emotion flickered through Ethan Reed at those words, and he tried to shake it off. Why did Clara Quinn evoke such a feeling in him? He didn't understand. But seeing Henry Young's coldness, he felt a pang of sympathy for her. Fancy a drink? Ethan Reed asked, feigning casualness. He'd been about to suggest the Imperial Palace, but the thought of that place brought Clara Quinn to mind, so he changed his suggestion mid-sentence. Sure. Ethan Reed's suggestion suited him. Tonight, he felt restless. After the two men left, the hushed whispers from earlier grew louder. Who was that woman? Probably just another one of Henry Young's exes. Discarded, in the quiet room, the air seemed to stagnate. Martin Hayes stood by the bed, waiting for Clara Quinn to wake up. His gaze, unwavering, rested on her beautiful yet pale face. A complex mix of emotions churned within him, too difficult to articulate. She was married. And that man treated her poorly. These two facts were hard for him to swallow. He had initially wanted to find the right moment to confess his feelings, to ask for a chance to care for her. But her heart already belonged to another. If that man had treated her well, if she were happy, he would have been content to watch from afar. But now, he felt that man didn't deserve her. Loving him was too painful. Could she let go? Martin Hayes silently pleaded, looking at Clara Quinn. Loving you is so exhausting. The sudden ringing of the phone interrupted Martin Hayes's train of thought. Picking up Clara Quinn's phone, the two words, Henry, displayed clearly on the screen made his heart clench. Hello? Is that you? Where is she? A cold laugh suddenly came from the other end of the line. Clara hasn't woken up yet. Click, the line went dead. A sneer appeared on Martin Hayes's face. He had heard it, the coquettish voice coming from the other end. His own wife was still unconscious, yet he was out seeking pleasure. Henry Young, what a bastard. At that moment, inside a high-end bar, Ethan Reed and Henry Young sat leisurely on a genuine leather sofa, each flanked by two beautiful women. Under the dim lights, the women were scantily clad, constantly teasing the two men. Soft hands brushed against them, making both of them feel a flush of heat. Despite their bodies reacting, neither made a move, both preoccupied with the same woman. The heat surged, but the anger in his heart burned hotter. Henry Young abruptly stood up, causing the woman who had been draped over him to fall to the floor. The woman immediately scrambled up, her supple body writhing like a snake as she pressed herself against him again. "Mr. Young. What's wrong? Was my service not good enough?" Her hands traced circles on Henry Young's chest, her seductive phoenix eyes glancing around. She was truly a captivating beauty. "I'm leaving. Ethan Reed, take your time." His entire body cold, Henry Young calmly pushed the clinging woman away and strode out of the room, his steps hurried. "Mr. Reed?" The woman who had been attending to Henry Young looked at Ethan Reed in surprise, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Had she not done well enough? "It's not that you didn't do well, but his soul has been captured by someone else," Ethan Reed said casually, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Combined with the previous incident, it seemed Henry did have some feelings for Clara Quinn. Ethan Reed should be happy to realize this, but why couldn't he feel any joy? Clara Quinn opened her eyes to pitch darkness. After a moment of dizziness, a faint light appeared. As the room's furnishings came into focus, she was surprised. Hadn't she been at the party? How did she get here? Her head still swimming, Clara Quinn sat up in bed and noticed a picture frame on the desk. It was a photo of her and Martin Hayes. Was this Martin Hayes's house? Looking at her radiant smile in the picture, Clara Quinn felt the joy of that moment slipping further away. Melancholy filled her eyes. "You're awake." A voice came from behind her. Clara Quinn turned and saw Martin Hayes's face, cold yet reassuring. Masking her emotions, she gave him a bright smile. "Thank you for bringing me back." Martin Hayes didn't reply, just stared at Clara Quinn's smile, surprised that after witnessing her frantic state, she still wore the bright and confident smile he remembered. "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Clara Quinn waved a hand in front of the dazed Martin Hayes, calling him back to reality. "Nothing." Shaking his head, Martin Hayes didn't ask the question burning in his mind. "You know what I'm thinking, right? You're wondering why I'm different now compared to before, aren't you?" Clara Quinn suddenly gave a self-deprecating laugh, her eyes filled with deep disappointment. As if remembering something, Clara Quinn looked at Martin Hayes and continued, "I don't know either. Ever since, whenever I see him, I just lose control. This feeling. Have you seen a doctor?" Martin Hayes frowned. This was indeed strange. Clara Quinn, disregarding everything for Henry Young, wasn't like the Clara Quinn he knew. Clara Quinn shook her head. "I think you've developed a kind of sickness towards him. If you don't treat it, you'll never be able to face him rationally, no matter the reason. You must see a doctor," Martin Hayes declared. He didn't want to see Clara Quinn lose her mind over Henry Young again. It was like watching an angel descend into hell, a sight that pained him deeply. Clara Quinn stammered, wanting to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to say this wasn't an illness, but she couldn't refute it. Chapter 24 Henry's Fury, loving you is so tiring. Clara Quinn's phone rang again, interrupting her. The name Henry on the screen made her pupils constrict. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "Where are you?" Henry Young's cold voice echoed in Clara Quinn's ear. Hearing his voice, her heart beat faster. Had he gone home? Was he waiting for her? The thought brought a slight smile to her lips. I won't be home tonight, click. Clara Quinn bit her lip, a faint metallic taste in her mouth. He wasn't coming home again tonight. Her expression turned desolate. Watching Clara Quinn's vacant stare, a flicker of worry crossed Martin Hayes's eyes. "When you fainted," he called, but hung up quickly. I heard a woman's voice on the other end. Martin Hayes gritted his teeth. To free Clara Quinn from this situation, it was best to let her see the reality. He doesn't deserve you. Martin Hayes. Clara Quinn's voice rose a few octaves, a flicker of pain in her eyes. She didn't want to hear anymore, not about Henry Young's indifference towards her from someone else's mouth. Seeing Clara Quinn on the verge of collapse, Martin Hayes sighed. He couldn't bear to see her in pain, quietly placing the food he had prepared in front of her. Don't think about it anymore. Eat something. Okay. Clara Quinn nodded. Clara Quinn's mood gradually stabilized. Martin Hayes, watching her, refrained from mentioning Henry Young again and instead discussed the new project their studio had taken on. They both immersed themselves in work, temporarily forgetting the unpleasantness. Meanwhile, Henry Young was driving to Martin Hayes's residence. Looking at the stationary red dot on his phone, the darkness in his eyes deepened, a storm of fury threatening to consume everything. A raging fury consumed him. She dared to be at another man's house. Henry Young suddenly felt like he'd been cuckolded. His wife, a representation of his male pride, he would absolutely not allow anyone to trample on it. When their discussion concluded, they realized it was nearly 10 o'clock. It's so late, I should go. Clara Quinn picked up her handbag, bid Martin Hayes farewell, but before she could take more than a few steps, her hand was caught. Stay tonight. Having spoken, Martin Hayes felt his tone was perhaps too suggestive, and hastily added, You're still not feeling well. Martin Hayes, Clara Quinn started to refuse, but looking at his resolute gaze, she felt a reluctant acceptance. Thinking of her cold, empty house, and Henry Young out gallivanting with another woman tonight, whether she returned home or not seemed inconsequential. The thought of Henry Young sent a pang of pain through Clara Quinn's heart. She couldn't help but nod, biting her lip slightly, her eyes glancing at the prominent bed before flickering towards Martin Hayes. You sleep here tonight, I'll sleep outside. Martin Hayes smiled knowingly, then moved to the side, retrieving a fresh towel and shirt. It might be a bit large, but it's clean. You're tired tonight, take a shower and get some rest. With that, he left the room, closing the door behind him, separating the two worlds. After showering in the bathroom outside, Martin Hayes changed his clothes. Looking at the darkened room, he smiled, preparing to arrange his bed for the night. A loud bang echoed from beyond the door. Martin Hayes's eyes narrowed. Who could it be at this late hour? The image of Henry Young's haughty demeanor flashed through his mind. Could it be him? Just then, the door opened. Clara Quinn, wearing Martin Hayes's shirt, her long, white legs exposed, leaned against the doorframe, yawning as she asked, Martin Hayes, what's all the commotion outside? Probably some mad dog banging on the door, Martin Hayes said casually, a flicker of coldness in his eyes. Clara Quinn was initially stunned, then covered her mouth with a laugh. Martin Hayes, since when did you become so witty? It's clearly. Her words abruptly ceased as she heard a voice calling from outside. Clara Quinn. Henry Young's cold voice resonated from outside, carrying clearly into the room, indicating he was shouting. Clara Quinn silently pictured the scene in her mind. I don't want to see him. With that, Clara Quinn turned back into the room, firmly locking the door, but her body remained pressed against it, silently listening to the commotion outside. The color in Martin Hayes's eyes darkened, then he slowly walked towards the main door. The door clicked open. Martin Hayes saw Henry Young standing there, radiating a chilling aura. CEO Young. What brings you here? Martin Hayes looked at Henry Young mockingly, his eyes filled with disdain. Where is she? Brushing past Martin Hayes, Henry Young stormed into the house, his eyes scanning the surroundings before settling on the closed door. She's asleep. As soon as he finished speaking, a fist suddenly descended, landing on Martin Hayes's cheek. His body staggered, and he stumbled back a few steps. What have you done? Henry Young's face darkened, his fist clenching tighter, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Martin Hayes was like prey in his eyes, someone he longed to tear apart. A mocking smile curled Martin Hayes's lips. Did Henry Young even care about Clara? He scoffed, what could we have done? Only, this ordinary sentence at such an ambiguous moment was completely misunderstood by Henry Young. Henry Young swung his fist, giving Martin Hayes another hard punch. Martin Hayes, caught off guard, fell to the ground with a loud thud. Clara Quinn, unable to remain inside any longer, flung the door open and rushed out. Henry Young, what the hell are you doing? Clara Quinn quickly went to Martin Hayes's side, helped him up, and angrily questioned Henry Young. Hadn't he harmed her enough? Now he wanted to hurt her friend too. Henry Young clenched his fists. If not for the last vestiges of reason holding him back, he feared he wouldn't be able to resist killing the adulterous couple before him. How dare she actually betray him? Looking at her provocative attire, Henry Young simply couldn't believe that nothing had happened between Clara Quinn and Martin Hayes. Or perhaps, it hadn't happened yet. A towering rage eclipsed his reason. At this moment, he only wanted one thing, to teach Clara Quinn, this audacious woman, a lesson. With that, he strode towards Clara Quinn, bent down, hoisted her over his shoulder, and quickly walked out. Martin Hayes immediately got up and quickly gave chase, but by the time he caught up, Henry Young had already driven off. Martin Hayes hurriedly got into his car and followed, but at an intersection, he lost track. He realized Clara Quinn had never told him where she lived. Dejectedly slamming his hand against the steering wheel, fury flashed in Martin Hayes's eyes. Henry Young took Clara Quinn directly to his home. Upon arrival, he entered a room and threw her onto the bed. Thrown with such force, Clara Quinn felt dizzy. Before she could react, a body quickly pressed down on her, like a massive mountain, crushing the air from her lungs. Under Henry Young, she struggled painfully, let me go. The helpless memory of that night flooded back, filling her with terror. She just wanted to escape from Henry Young. She didn't want this, to be treated like a plaything beneath him. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes vacant. Holding Clara Quinn's struggling limbs, Henry Young gripped her chin, sneering, let you go. What were you saying under that man just now? No, I wasn't, Clara Quinn shook her head, her voice filled with helplessness. Weren't? Scoffing, Henry Young's hand slowly moved down, caressing Clara Quinn's slender thighs, his voice husky, dressed so provocatively. And nothing happened. Looking at Henry Young's ferocious expression, Clara Quinn suddenly froze. Are you jealous? Jealous? Henry Young snorted, his eyes icy, would I be jealous of you? His grip on Clara Quinn's chin tightened, quickly reddening her skin. While the pain was sharp, a flicker of joy ignited within her. Regardless of the reason, Henry Young was reacting to her relationship with Martin Hayes. Seeing the joy in Clara Quinn's eyes, Henry Young's gaze sharpened. In the next instant, Clara Quinn's shirt was ripped open, revealing her exquisite form. Seeing the madness in Henry Young's eyes, Clara Quinn's body trembled uncontrollably, desperately trying to escape the perilous situation, but she had nowhere to run. Henry Young sneered, watching Clara Quinn struggle, then removed the last barrier of clothing and forcefully entered her. Painful, Clara Quinn cried out involuntarily. The brutal force was unbearable. Pain teaches loyalty, he said, beginning to move rhythmically above her. His actions were merciless, but Clara Quinn's initial agony eventually gave way to a different sensation. Observing Clara Quinn's intoxicated gaze, Henry Young abruptly withdrew from her and walked towards the bathroom. Clara Quinn lay on the bed, her eyes hazy, and softly called out, Henry. What? That desperate for a man already? Henry turned, his gaze icy as he looked at Clara Quinn. His cold, indifferent words instantly extinguished all of Clara Quinn's desire. How could he? How could he treat her like this? He wanted her, then he didn't. Seeing Clara Quinn's pale face, Henry Young turned and entered the bathroom. The dripping water echoed in Clara Quinn's ears, mirroring her current emotional state. #### Chapter 25, Stirring Trouble. Clara Quinn curled up on the bed, feeling empty. It was as if this position could offer her a fragile warmth. She felt cold, inside and out. Her hands seemed to still feel the lingering warmth of Henry Young's body. But only for a moment. Reality dragged her back down to hell. Henry Young, he was so cruel to her, truly heartless. The sheet in Clara Quinn's hands was crumpled beyond recognition. The door suddenly burst open. Clara Quinn heard his footsteps, the rustling of him dressing, then the sound of the door opening. Unable to contain herself any longer, she wrapped the sheet around her and jumped out of bed. Do you really not want to see me that much? You can't satisfy me, so you won't let me find someone else. With those words, which pierced straight through Clara Quinn's heart, Henry Young slammed the door and left. Clara Quinn collapsed onto the bed, clutching her chest. What was happening there? It really hurt. Frantically, she dialed a number. Hello, who is this? A sweet voice came from the other end. Hearing it, Clara Quinn's tears flowed like rain. Bloomy. Clara? The voice on the other end was surprised, then laced with worry. Clara, what's wrong? It hurts so much. My heart hurts so much. Sobbing, Clara Quinn felt her breath becoming labored. Where are you? The voice on the other end suddenly sharpened, carrying a note of command. I'm at home. With that, the phone slipped from Clara Quinn's hand. She covered her mouth with both hands, trying to stifle her cries, but the choked sobs were even more alarming. Hearing the silence on the other end of the line, the person there immediately gathered their things and hurried down to the garage. By chance, they encountered Henry Young walking hand in hand with a stunning beauty. Upon meeting them, Vivian Bloom didn't hesitate to slap the woman beside Henry Young before walking away, head held high. Vivian Bloom's actions were so swift that both Henry Young and the woman with him were taken aback. Henry Young, is this your little tart? The woman beside Henry Young clutched her face and suddenly yelled. What rotten luck to run into this playboy Henry Young on the street. Seeing the connection between Henry Young and her own man, they had started to walk away together, but after only a few steps, she'd been struck. She's not. Henry Young frowned, thinking of Vivian Bloom's hurried expression. Could something have happened to Clara Quinn? The thought of Clara Quinn fainting earlier that day deepened the furrow in Henry Young's brow. Henry Young. A voice, teeth gritted, snapped him back to attention. Grace Miller, she is not my woman. If not, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Damn it, I've grown this big, and besides my father, no one has dared to hit me. The stunning beauty sneered, a glint of malice in her eyes. Henry Young remained coldly silent. Teaching Vivian Bloom a lesson was fine. Clara Quinn, relying on Vivian Bloom, had caused enough trouble. This time, they had messed with the wrong person. Vivian Bloom rushed to Clara Quinn's home, fumbled with the key, and hurried towards Clara's room. Through countless nights of Clara's restless tossing and turning, she had been there, by her side, seeing her through to dawn. Taking a deep breath, Vivian Bloom pushed open the door. Seeing the slight movement of a figure on the bed, relief washed over her. She had been truly afraid that something terrible had happened to Clara. Walking softly to the bedside, Vivian Bloom slipped in behind Clara Quinn, holding her close and whispering, Clara. Clara Quinn turned, clinging to Vivian Bloom and sobbing, my precious Kleenex, I wanted to leave him, but he forced me. I couldn't resist. I hate him, but I also love him. What have I done to deserve this treatment from him? Vivian Bloom stroked Clara Quinn's back, offering gentle comfort, and listened as Clara recounted the events of the past few days. The more she heard, the tighter Vivian Bloom's brow became. Henry Young was being too cruel to Clara. The advice for Clara Quinn to leave him hovered on Vivian Bloom's lips, but she held back. Besides the fact that Clara herself understood the exhausting nature of loving Henry Young, any further urging from an outsider would only make her dig her heels in deeper. Vivian Bloom only wanted Clara to be happy. Whatever decision she made, Vivian would support her completely. Held in Vivian Bloom's embrace, Clara Quinn gradually calmed down. Her eyes puffy and swollen, Vivian Bloom teased, "With eyes like that, how are you going to face anyone tomorrow? I thought you had a big business deal to discuss." Clara Quinn replied, her voice muffled. "Let me get you some ice. Otherwise, you won't be able to see anyone tomorrow." Vivian Bloom turned and quickly got up. "My precious Kleenex, you're so good to me." Gratitude shone in Clara Quinn's eyes. Having a friend like Vivian Bloom was a blessing. "If you know I'm good to you, then listen to me more. Think about whether this is worth it." Vivian Bloom rolled her eyes, an expression that didn't quite suit her. Seeing Clara Quinn about to speak, she added, "No need to answer now. Just think about it. Just remember, whatever you decide, I'll support you. My precious tissue, I'll think about it carefully." A reluctant look flickered across Clara Quinn's eyes. Both Martin Hayes and Vivian Bloom had told her that Henry Young wasn't a good husband. He truly wasn't a good husband, but her heart was completely swayed by him. Asking her to give up was too difficult, unless one day she completely lost hope in him. It's just that she didn't know when that day would come. Vivian Bloom's lips curled slightly. Seeing the inner turmoil in Clara Quinn's eyes, she knew Clara couldn't let go. Sighing inwardly, she knew she could only try her best to protect Clara Quinn. But at this moment, Vivian Bloom was unaware of the immense danger approaching. Imperial Palace inside the most luxurious private room, unlike the usual chaos, two handsome men sat properly. The man on the left, with narrow, fox-like eyes, a straight nose, and thin, red lips, leaned casually against the sofa, revealing his firm chest, exuding a wild, unrestrained aura. The man on the right, with handsome features and similarly narrow, fox-like eyes, exchanged glances with the man on the left, a wicked smile playing on his lips, radiating a carefree air. "Ethan, why hasn't Henry arrived yet?" The man on the left asked casually, but his eyes unconsciously glanced towards the door, revealing their identities as Ethan Reed and his older brother, Owen Reed. "Owen, Henry went to pick up fifth sister-in-law, he'll definitely be a little late." Ethan Reed looked at Owen Reed, a teasing glint in his eyes. Who would have thought that his cunning Owen, the renowned Owen Reed, would be so tightly wrapped around the finger of a mafia princess? This love affair was truly unpredictable. Wait until you meet a woman who makes you toss and turn with longing, then you'll understand my current state of mind. Owen Reed glanced at Ethan Reed, a look of willing devotion in his eyes. Hearing Owen Reed's words, a beautiful figure involuntarily appeared in Ethan Reed's mind, causing him to momentarily lose focus. "Ethan, do you have someone in your heart?" Owen Reed, noticing the longing in Ethan Reed's eyes, nudged him gently. "No, finding a woman to tie me down is tiring. Being alone is more enjoyable." Ethan Reed leaned back against the sofa unconsciously. Looking at Ethan Reed's actions, a mocking smile played on Owen Reed's lips. Ethan probably hadn't realized that, since childhood, whenever he lied, he would look around to hide his guilt. From his actions, Owen Reed had a suspicion in his heart. Ethan likely already had someone in his heart, and even if he didn't, that day wouldn't be far off. However, he wouldn't expose him for now. He wanted to see who Ethan Reed was interested in. A sound came from the door, and Ethan Reed quickly stood up to open it. The door opened, and Henry Young and the stunning beauty from earlier entered. "Henry, fifth sister-in-law." Ethan Reed really wanted to rub his eyes. He desperately wanted to know who would dare leave a mark on his fifth sister-in-law's face. Get lost, what are you looking at? Covering her face, the woman Ethan Reed called fifth sister-in-law stormed into the room and plopped down next to Owen Reed, yelling, "That bitch, she's dead meat." Who? Owen Reed's eyes flashed with bloodlust, noticing the crimson handprint on Grace Miller's face. Who dared to touch his woman? Some crazy dame, probably with that pretty boy over there. Grace Miller shot a look at the elegant Henry Young, her anger flaring. This was just collateral damage. She's not my woman. Did it ever occur to you that Owen Reed might have provoked some beauty, and now they're targeting you? Henry Young smirked, draining his glass of red wine. He'd barely left the bar when Ethan Reed called, saying Owen Reed had arrived at the Imperial Palace. He wasn't satisfied, though, and went to find Clara Quinn first. What happened next was unexpected, and halfway through, he remembered the approaching deadline, forcing a cold shower. The memory of Clara Quinn's soft body still stoked the embers of desire in Henry Young's eyes. You don't need to tell me. With my connections, I'll find out. Grace Miller glared at Henry Young, contempt in her eyes. She couldn't believe finding one woman would be so difficult. A cool, indifferent smile played on Henry Young's lips. Seeing that smile, Ethan Reed felt a jolt of unease. Chapter 26 Protector bow in distress. He feared Clara Quinn was the one who attacked fifth sister-in-law. Henry Young likely never considered Clara Quinn his woman. So, was fifth sister-in-law referring to Clara Quinn? Henry Young's eyes darkened, observing Ethan Reed's demeanor. Ethan Reed truly cared for Clara Quinn, at least more than her own husband seemed to. His eyes flickered. Since Ethan Reed was so concerned about Clara Quinn's involvement, as a good brother, he couldn't leave him in suspense. That woman wasn't Clara Quinn, he said slowly. Relief washed over Ethan Reed, but then he caught Henry Young's knowing look and stammered, why are you explaining this to me? No reason. Just noticed you seem awfully concerned about her. Well, isn't she pitiful? Falling into your clutches, Henry Young, Ethan Reed feigned indifference. She jumped willingly. Henry Young recalled the scene before he left, a spark in his eyes. Though she was worthless, her body wasn't bad. Who is Clara Quinn? Grace Miller asked curiously, looking between the two men. My wife. Playboy, you're married. Why didn't we hear anything? How disrespectful. Right, woo. Grace Miller nudged Owen Reed. Yeah, I thought you'd be the last to marry, not the first. Owen Reed paused, then said, Clara Quinn, the Quinn family's daughter. Owen's been gone a while, hasn't he? You even know that? Henry Young glanced at Owen Reed, surprise flickering in his eyes, then darkening. She's irrelevant. Not worth your concern. Ethan Reed remained silent, taking another sip of red wine. Owen Reed's gaze shifted between Henry Young and Ethan Reed. Something seemed odd. Was it because of this Clara Quinn? He suddenly found himself intrigued by her, though purely out of curiosity. The following day, thanks to Vivian Bloom's care, the swelling around Clara Quinn's eyes had finally subsided, though the dark circles beneath them still betrayed her exhaustion from the previous night. Cover those dark circles. Vivian Bloom dabbed concealer repeatedly onto Clara Quinn's face. Are you done yet? Clara Quinn urged, glancing at her watch. Her appointment with Martin Hayes was approaching, and she couldn't be late. Having decided to commit to this job, she had to deliver results. Finished. Look in the mirror. I don't understand how you can have such good features and still manage to ruin them like this. We need to schedule a spa day, stat. Vivian Bloom placed the mirror in front of Clara Quinn, nagging. Looking at herself in the mirror, Clara Quinn was stunned. It had been a while since she put on proper makeup. Her delicate features, smooth skin, clear eyes beneath elegant lashes, and plump red lips that looked ripe for a kiss. "I'm leaving." Clara Quinn snapped back to reality, grabbing her things and heading for the door. Catching her reflection in the mirror, she couldn't help but recall her ambitious younger self. That version of herself felt a lifetime away. Watching Clara Quinn's hurried departure, Vivian Bloom shook her head, feeling a pang of sympathy for her friend. Arriving at the entrance, Clara Quinn found Martin Hayes's car already waiting. With a faint smile, she climbed in. "Martin Hayes, you must have been worried sick last night. Was everything all right last night?" Martin Hayes asked casually, his grip on the steering wheel unusually tight. "Everything's fine." Clara Quinn shook her head, concealing her emotions. Changing the subject, she said, "We still have that meeting with the company today. We can't lose face, especially if we want to avoid getting the short end of the stick." "Right. Ethan Reed's company." "Ethan Reed, the representative from that company we met last time, is here." One of Ethan Reed's associates informed him. Ethan Reed had just arrived at the office, a perfect opportunity to assert his dominance. "You mean that small company that screwed us over?" Ethan Reed raised an eyebrow, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, we're still fuming. We're planning some payback. Let's go see what they want." Ethan Reed rose gracefully and led the way to the meeting room. Upon entering, Ethan Reed froze. "Clara Quinn." "Ethan Reed? What are you doing here?" Clara Quinn stared at Ethan Reed in surprise. Was the world really this small? Ethan Reed's alluring eyes flickered. "I never expected the owner of that small company to be you." He'd heard from his associate that the deal was off. They could easily find another company to work with, but he hadn't anticipated that this small company would exploit a loophole in the contract and demand compensation for emotional distress. "I also didn't expect the owner of this company to be you." Clara Quinn extended her hand towards Ethan Reed. Ethan Reed took her hand and then turned to Martin Hayes. "Hello, I'm Ethan Reed." "Martin Hayes." Their hands clasped tightly, their gazes locked in an intense exchange. "Fancy meeting you here." "In that case, Ethan Reed, this deal is all yours." Ethan Reed's associate clapped him on the shoulder and left the room. This small company, or rather, reputable studio, had a good reputation in the industry. Securing a partnership with them wouldn't be a bad move. In the room, only the three of them remained. Ethan Reed lazily picked up the contract, glanced over it, pulled a pen from his sleeve, and signed directly. "No need for formalities. Between acquaintances. Aren't you afraid of being set up by us again?" "Would Clara set me up, considering our relationship?" "Certainly not." Clara Quinn smiled, a playful glint in her eyes. "We'll handle this deal flawlessly and give you a satisfying outcome. Then I await your good news." Ethan Reed glanced at the silent Martin Hayes beside him, a pensive look in his eyes. Clara Quinn's phone suddenly rang. She smiled and stepped aside to answer. "Hello, Tissue," she said cheerfully. The success of this deal would further elevate their industry standing, undoubtedly a positive development for her. "Clara." A panicked voice came from the other end, and Clara Quinn's smile froze. "Tissue, what's wrong?" Clara Quinn had never heard such terror in Vivian Bloom's voice. Something must be terribly wrong. "Someone's trying to kidnap me. I'm hiding in the Imperial Palace's underground parking. Bring someone to get me, click." "Tissue, Tissue." Clara Quinn lowered her phone, her eyes filled with panic. "What's wrong?" Martin Hayes and Ethan Reed, seeing Clara Quinn's distress after the call, rushed over. "Tissue, she's in danger. Can you take me to her?" Looking at Martin Hayes, Clara Quinn pleaded. Her mind was blank with fear for Vivian Bloom, her only remaining friend. "Don't panic. I'll take you." With that, Martin Hayes and Clara Quinn hurried away. Watching their retreating figures, a bitter smile touched Ethan Reed's lips. He then picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Hello, it's me, Ethan Reed. I need you to investigate something." Martin Hayes and Clara Quinn rushed to the Imperial Palace. Following Vivian Bloom's signal, Clara Quinn quickly found her. Vivian Bloom's exquisite makeup was smudged, and her clothes were dirty from hiding. Clara Quinn had never seen her in such disarray. Clara Quinn's eyes stung, and tears fell unconsciously. What happened? Why are you like this?" "It's nothing. I probably offended someone I shouldn't have." Vivian Bloom's alluring face wore a nonchalant smile. "In this line of work, you sometimes cross paths with powerful figures." Clara Quinn didn't believe her. Vivian Bloom was always tactful, she couldn't have offended anyone. Besides, Vivian Bloom associated with many wealthy individuals. A thought struck Clara Quinn, and her face paled. "Vivian, is this because of me? Did this happen because of something I asked you to do?" Clara Quinn recalled the tasks she'd asked Vivian Bloom to handle, the ones that pushed boundaries. She couldn't think of any other reason. Vivian Bloom froze, then, seeing Clara Quinn's pale face, quickly shook her head. "Don't overthink it. I haven't done anything for you recently. But, don't say anything, let's find a safe place to hide first, those guys are relentless." Vivian Bloom gritted her teeth when mentioning the men in black. Even more hateful was that their power seemed immense, and the Imperial Palace was completely unwilling to intervene on her behalf. "Okay." Clara Quinn quickly wiped her tears and promptly led Vivian Bloom to where Martin Hayes had parked the car. Safely inside Martin Hayes's car, both Clara Quinn and Vivian Bloom breathed a sigh of relief. "Martin Hayes, don't ask anything." Clara Quinn told Martin Hayes, understanding in her heart that it was likely because of her that Vivian Bloom was in danger, and she couldn't drag Martin Hayes into this any further. Martin Hayes clenched his hand, then released it. The car gradually left the Imperial Palace. Along the way, Clara Quinn held Vivian Bloom silently, until Martin Hayes brought them to the villa she shared with Henry Young. Clara Quinn helped Vivian Bloom out of the car. After a few steps, Martin Hayes's car window suddenly rolled down. "If anything happens, look for me. I'm always ready." "Okay." Clara Quinn gave Martin Hayes a bright smile, then led Vivian Bloom into the villa. Chapter 27 Pleading with Quinn for help. Clara Quinn led Vivian Bloom into the living room and personally made her a cup of hot milk. "Vivian, who exactly are those people who wanted to catch you?" "I don't know." "Are you hiding it because it's related to me?" Clara Quinn's eyes held a hint of determination. She always thought that she was the one who had implicated Vivian, and she couldn't continue to be a burden to her. "I told you, it's not related to you. Don't overthink it. Right now, I still have to rely on you to support me." Vivian Bloom leaned her head against Clara Quinn, wanting to dispel the gloom surrounding her, but unfortunately, the effect was negligible. "Just rest assured and get some sleep here. I'll go and find out what happened." After saying that, Clara Quinn urged Vivian Bloom to lie down on the bed and gently closed the door. Vivian Bloom, lying on the bed, looked at the closed door, a warmth rising in her heart. Clara had finally grown up. Clara Quinn sat on the sofa, holding her phone in a daze. She wanted to find someone who understood the situation, but realized she didn't even know where to begin. Before, with just one phone call, she could call Vivian Bloom to help her solve any problem, but now, with Vivian Bloom in trouble, what could she do to help her? Clara Quinn's eyes welled up slightly. Only now did she realize how good Vivian Bloom had been to her. Her finger scrolled across the phone screen, and Clara Quinn's gaze stopped on the name Henry. Henry was the CEO of Young Corporation. He would definitely be able to find out who Vivian Bloom had offended. The call connected. "What is it?" An extremely cold voice came from the other end of the line. "Bloom." Vivian Bloom offended someone, I don't know who. I wanted to ask if you knew anything. Biting her lip lightly, Clara Quinn hesitantly voiced her question. She offended the Lay family's young miss. You don't need to worry about this. Do you know her? Could you plead for Vivian? Humph, Clara Quinn, she brought this upon herself. This is also to let you know, next time, choose your targets carefully. What do you mean? Wasn't it because of you that Vivian Bloom slapped that woman? I'm hanging up, I'm very busy, Henry Young abruptly ended the call. This time, he wanted to see how she would handle the situation. Would Clara Quinn personally beg him for Vivian Bloom's sake? Hearing the click from the other end, Clara Quinn closed her eyes, fighting back tears. So Henry Young knew. He actually knew. But he still watched Vivian Bloom get arrested, sitting on his high horse while they both struggled. She exhaled softly, as if trying to release all the pent-up frustration within her. Since Henry Young was unreliable, she could only rely on the Quinn family. Thinking of Christopher Quinn, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. No matter what, she had to try. Opening the door, she saw Vivian Bloom sitting on the bed, staring blankly at her phone. Hearing the door, Vivian looked up and quickly composed herself. What's wrong? So you really got into this mess because of me? Clara Quinn went to Vivian Bloom's side, her eyes brimming with tears. You found out? Yesterday, after your call, I saw Henry Young with a woman in the underground parking lot. I couldn't help but slap her. I didn't expect her background to be so complicated. Vivian Bloom chuckled, trying to sound nonchalant. Vivian, come back to the Quinn family with me. Clara Quinn took Vivian Bloom's hand. If they really want to make trouble for me, even the Quinn family won't be able to help. Vivian Bloom shook her head. I've already sold my shares in the Imperial Palace and received a large sum. I could use that money to escape abroad, but, glancing at Clara Quinn, Vivian Bloom clearly couldn't bear to leave her. If she left, who would Clara Quinn turn to if something happened? Darling, you promised to protect me for life. So, don't give up before it's absolutely necessary. Clara Quinn looked at Vivian Bloom, her voice firm. All right. Clara Quinn led Vivian Bloom out of the villa and drove towards the Quinn residence. Don't worry, darling, I won't let anyone hurt you. On the way back, Clara Quinn took a deep breath, her grip on the steering wheel so tight that her knuckles turned white. Vivian Bloom was in this predicament because of her. It was her fault, she was the one who caused Vivian to offend those people. Vivian used to be so imposing, when did she ever have to endure such hardship? It was all because she was too capricious, thinking that with Vivian Bloom's connections, no one would dare to touch her. But she underestimated the sheer number of powerful figures in Imperial City. Vivian Bloom had some connections, but she hadn't been in Imperial City for that long. How could she possibly stand against those born and raised in the city's intricate web of power? Her words were laced with guilt, which Vivian Bloom clearly picked up on. Smiling reassuringly, Vivian Bloom placed a hand on Clara Quinn's shoulder. Clara, don't say that. For all these years, you're the only one I consider a true friend. It was my own impulsiveness that led to this, it has nothing to do with you. The more Vivian Bloom spoke, the more uneasy Clara Quinn felt. Some things, while not directly instructed by her, were ultimately her doing, and she bore the responsibility and obligation to handle them. She swore she wouldn't let anyone harm Vivian Bloom, no matter the cost. Vivian Bloom said no more, understanding Clara Quinn's temperament. What she set her mind to, she accomplished, evident in her years-long pursuit of Henry Young. Some things had gone irrevocably wrong, a small misstep leading to a significant divergence, beyond redemption. When she arrived home, the house was empty. The servants were delighted to see her return, after all, they had watched Clara Quinn grow up. Preoccupied, Clara Quinn had the servants take Vivian Bloom's luggage to the room next to hers and pulled Vivian into her own. Our Quinn family, while not the most powerful in Imperial City, isn't one to be trifled with. Don't worry, no one will harm you here, Clara Quinn assured. I'll tell my father tonight. This is my fault. He loves me, he'll just scold me and find a solution. Stay here and don't worry. Vivian Bloom nodded. Clara, are you sure this is okay? If your father thinks you caused such a big problem, will he? Don't worry. Clara Quinn pinched Vivian Bloom's cheek, winking reassuringly. That's my dad. Don't you worry about me. Even if the sky falls outside this room tonight, you absolutely must not leave. Understand? Clara. You must promise me. Unable to sway her, Vivian Bloom finally nodded in agreement. Rest then. I'll wait for them downstairs. Clara Quinn took a deep breath. Truthfully, she wasn't sure how her father would react. He'd likely be furious, most likely wouldn't help. He loved her, but he never tolerated her mistakes. This was a gamble. If things went south, who else could she turn to? Time ticked by. Upstairs, Vivian Bloom, exhausted but sleepless. Downstairs, Clara Quinn sat on the sofa, hugging a pillow, watching the clock. Top floor, Young Corporation. Henry Young set down his pen, lost in thought. She really took that woman to the Quinn residence? Yes, sir, his secretary replied. Our surveillance reports she's fiercely protective. This might be difficult to handle. Henry Young scoffed. What was Clara Quinn thinking? Had she grown tired of living? Was her mind addled from idleness? Who doesn't know Director Quinn's temper? How dare she walk right into the lion's den? Do you think Clara Quinn can protect that woman at the Quinn residence? The secretary didn't answer, because everyone knew the answer was definitely no. Absolutely not. So, he was waiting for her to come begging him. What? Back to the Quinn family already? A shocked voice rang out, accompanied by a tall figure abruptly rising from a chair. Is she insane? Mr. Reed, why such a strong reaction? Benjamin Carter, surprised, looked at the man who was usually calm in the face of everything, now seemingly losing his composure. Ethan Reed frowned, his face grim, and slowly sat back down. He also wanted to know what was wrong with him, why every single time those 3 words, Clara Quinn, affected his mood. That day, he sent someone to investigate who had angered his 5th sister-in-law. The news he received, as expected, was related to Clara Quinn. Not Clara Quinn herself, but her close friend, Vivian Bloom. Is she planning to ask the old man of the Quinn family to protect that woman? Benjamin Carter nodded. I bet 100,000. Thinking it over, he felt the bet wasn't high enough, and added, I bet this Benjamin Carter's head, if the old man of the Quinn family intervenes, I'll kill myself. Get out. Go somewhere cool and stay there. Ethan Reed cursed without a clear reason. Everyone exchanged glances and fell silent, knowing that Ethan Reed rarely got angry, but when he did, no one dared to provoke him. Clara Quinn. Ethan Reed silently recited the name in his heart. Just as Clara Quinn was about to doze off on the sofa, the door finally creaked open. Her drowsiness vanished, and Clara Quinn bolted upright from the sofa, nearly tumbling to the floor. Miss, be careful. A servant, heart skipping a beat, reminded her. It's fine. Clara Quinn, unfazed, hurried to the door. As the door opened, Christopher Quinn saw Clara Quinn looking at him, breathless and surprised. Dad, welcome home. Clara Quinn immediately rushed to hug him, kissed him on the cheek, and took the briefcase from his hand, saying with a smile, You've worked hard, Dad. Let me carry that for you. When did his daughter become so grown-up and understanding? Why hadn't he noticed? Christopher Quinn, completely bewildered, could only chuckle. No good deed goes unpunished. What is it you want this time? Did you set your sights on something you can't afford, or did you cause some trouble and want my forgiveness? Christopher Quinn asked directly, changing his shoes as he walked inside. Clara Quinn lowered her head, feigning guilt. Did I actually hit the nail on the head? Christopher Quinn laughed, finding his daughter's demeanor quite endearing. Dad, don't be mad when I tell you this, okay? You absolutely have to help me resolve this. Clara Quinn said softly. What is it that's making you so hesitant? What happened? I offended someone from the Thunderbolt. She said, carefully observing Christopher Quinn's expression. As expected, the moment she finished speaking, Christopher Quinn's face changed, the smile vanishing completely. Chapter 28, Ethan Reed Takes Action. Clara Quinn flinched, knowing Christopher Quinn wasn't easily angered, but his wrath was terrifying. Thunderbolt. Our business has always stayed clear of the underworld. How did you provoke them? I didn't know Grace Miller was with Thunderbolt. We had a disagreement, and I had someone teach her a lesson. I didn't expect my friend to be targeted in retaliation. Clara Quinn's voice trailed off, barely audible. Dad, you have to help me, fool. Christopher Quinn roared, making Clara Quinn tremble. The Quinn family is vast and prosperous, but our dealings are legitimate. We have no ties to the underworld. How can I help you? Clara, I've overlooked your childish antics, but this is reckless. Dad. I'm not asking you to confront them. Just protect my friend, or help her leave the country safely. Enough. Christopher Quinn interrupted. This is non-negotiable. I've heard about your unsavory friend. She's a bad influence. The Quinn family cannot be involved. End your association with her immediately. Dad. I'm retiring upstairs. Deal with this yourself. Clara Quinn sank onto the sofa, a crushing weight in her chest. She anticipated her father's refusal, but hearing it aloud stung. The slam of the upstairs door made Clara Quinn wince. Upstairs, Vivian Bloom sat awake on the bed, watching her enter. With a bitter laugh and a shake of her head, Clara Quinn sat beside her. Vivian, I'm sorry, don't apologize. It's not your fault. Vivian Bloom offered a reassuring smile. You look terrible. Rest. We'll face this. If you fall apart, who will help me? Recognizing Vivian Bloom's comfort, Clara Quinn managed a weak smile and pulled the covers over herself, silent. Moonlight filtered through the window, unable to penetrate the darkness engulfing her. Clara Quinn dreamt of a flood. She clung to a tree, about to be swept away. Upstream, Henry Young held a beautiful woman, sneering at her. Fury choked her screams. Then, two hands reached out, one from Ethan Reed, the other from Martin Hayes. The man she yearned for, embraced another, drifting further away. No. Henry Young. Come back. How could you do this to me? How? Clara Quinn bolted upright, gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the nightmare clinging to her. She slipped out of bed, grabbed a robe, and went outside. The night breeze was chilly, but it was nothing compared to the coldness in her heart. Sitting on the garden swing, Clara Quinn recalled the carefree moments of her childhood spent swaying on it, and a sudden wave of resentment washed over her. Why did people have to grow up? Why did life have to be so complicated? Unconsciously, she dialed a number, only snapping back to reality when the person on the other end repeatedly called her name. Clara Quinn. The voice on the other end was sleepy, clearly roused from sleep by her call. I'm sorry, I don't know why I called you, Clara Quinn apologized, her voice filled with remorse. Did I wake you? Ethan Reed shifted, propping himself up against the headboard. He glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 3 a.m. It's all right. Why are you calling me at this hour? Perhaps instinctively, she felt that Ethan Reed might have a solution to the Vivian Bloom situation. Although, given Ethan Reed's stance, the likelihood of him helping was slim, but she was truly desperate. Even the slightest glimmer of hope was worth pursuing. Ethan Reed. I need your help. Clara Quinn took a deep breath and spoke. The Imperial Palace incident. Ethan Reed sounded surprised. He thought Clara Quinn would plead with her father, perhaps even Henry Young, but he never imagined she would turn to him. Surprise mingled with a flicker of pleasure. He hadn't expected to be the first person she'd reach out to. You know. As soon as she asked, Clara Quinn realized how foolish her question was. Such a significant event, if Henry Young knew, how could his close associate, Ethan Reed, not be aware? Ethan Reed, I'm truly at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. I know this puts you in a difficult position, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other option, but leave it to me. Ethan Reed interrupted Clara Quinn's rambling, his voice a gentle, reassuring chuckle. This city is small potatoes. There's nothing the Reeds can't handle. Just wait and see. In truth, the matter wasn't particularly difficult for Ethan Reed. Reed Enterprises and Thunderbolt had always maintained a good relationship, further cemented by Grace Miller being Owen Reed's woman. If he asked Owen to put in a good word, the situation could likely be resolved. Moreover, despite being Thunderbolt's heiress, Grace Miller was always straightforward and outspoken. This time, it was Vivian Bloom who acted unreasonably, truly provoking her. He had a way to appease his future sister-in-law. Once her anger subsided, everything would fall into place. Really? Clara Quinn, who hadn't held much hope, felt a spark ignite within her at Ethan Reed's words. My word is my bond, Clara Quinn. Thank you. Clara Quinn couldn't quite articulate the emotions swirling within her, so she settled for a simple, heartfelt, Ethan Reed. It was rare to find people genuinely willing to help, something she hadn't fully appreciated before, but now cherished deeply. The wind was still cold, but a flicker of warmth now touched her heart. Early the next morning, Ethan Reed drove to Owen's house. The banging on the door was loud enough to tear the house down. Anyone who didn't know better would think it was a vendetta. Owen Reed and Grace Miller, sound asleep, were jolted awake by Ethan Reed's racket. The culprit, seemingly oblivious to any wrongdoing, tossed a pile of miscellaneous items into the living room and sprawled on the sofa. Grace Miller glanced at the clock. 5:50 a.m., tell me, old sport, what wind blew you here today? Look at the time. Were you up all night? She sat down next to Ethan Reed, her voice thick with sleep. The mark of a slap was still vividly imprinted on her face, clear enough for Ethan Reed to see the force used. Oh my, fifth sister-in-law, let me see your face. He leaned in, examining it from all angles. Goodness, such a beautiful face marred like this. It had almost completely faded, how could one tell how severe it was? Looking at the scattered tonics on the floor, then at Ethan Reed's unusual behavior, Grace Miller thought, Ethan Reed, what's wrong? Don't play coy with me. You weren't exactly heartbroken when I got slapped, and now you're suddenly concerned. Everyone knew Ethan Reed's nature. This time, he was probably up to something, likely wanting a favor. Fifth sister-in-law is always perceptive. Ethan Reed didn't bother hiding it, sprawling back on the sofa. I came here today to ask you a favor. Can we let this go? Grace Miller narrowed her eyes at this. Mr. Reed, this is the first time I, Grace Miller, have suffered such a great humiliation. You're asking me to just let it go? Her tone was no longer playful. I guarantee the woman who slapped you will never appear before you again. Or, if you're still not satisfied, you can slap her back. Ethan Reed tried to simplify the situation for her. Just do it as a favor to me, fifth sister-in-law. Grace Miller remained silent, her expression still grim. Grace Miller's humiliation doesn't sit well with me either. If we don't teach her a lesson she'll never forget, they'll think Thunderbolt and the Reeds can't even handle a minor manager at the Imperial Palace. Ethan Reed, why are you siding with an outsider this time? Owen Reed descended the stairs, having overheard their conversation. Owen, I'm not siding with her. Ethan Reed paused, then continued, someone else asked me for help last night, and I'm hoping you two can help me. A woman? Ethan Reed nodded. Grace Miller raised an eyebrow, rubbing her less swollen face, lost in thought. All right, it's rare for Ethan Reed to care about a woman like this. Grace Miller, will be magnanimous this once. Remember me, fifth sister-in-law, when you've won your wife back. But damn it, who told you to be so calculating? A slap for a slap is nothing. If it weren't for your pleading, I'd make sure she wouldn't have a place to stand in this country. Ethan Reed smiled, but didn't reply. The matter was settled. Clara Quinn would be nothing to him, she had another man. And he himself didn't understand whether he felt pity or fascination for her. Hashtag Chapter 29 Courtship. After receiving Grace Miller's promise, Ethan Reed immediately called Clara Quinn back. Wet wipes, it's Ethan Reed calling. Clara Quinn looked at the number on the screen, her heart pounding. Quickly answering, Ethan Reed. The matter has been resolved. No one will bother Vivian Bloom anymore. Ethan Reed's voice came from the other end of the line, clear as a bell to both Clara Quinn and Vivian Bloom. Wet wipes, that's great. Clara Quinn immediately ran to Vivian Bloom's side, hugging her and exclaiming excitedly. Phone, Vivian Bloom pointed at Clara Quinn's phone, nudging her. A hint of joy flickered in her eyes. Right, Ethan Reed. Clara Quinn stuck her tongue out at Vivian Bloom, then spoke into the phone, Ethan Reed, thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you. Clara Quinn was truly grateful to Ethan Reed. Henry Young and her father were unwilling to help her, yet Ethan Reed, whom she had only met a few times, agreed to help. This truly touched Clara Quinn. A ripple of emotion crossed Ethan Reed's eyes on the other end of the line. His gaze shifted, carrying a hint of allure. He was pleased with Clara Quinn's gratitude. His voice was modest, it was just a small matter. How about I treat you to dinner? Clara Quinn suggested. She wouldn't feel at ease without repaying him. A glint flashed in Ethan Reed's eyes. He suddenly thought of something, if you really want to thank me, come with me to a place, all right? All right. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and alcohol. Harsh music blared, and neon lights of all colors flashed continuously on the dance floor, where a crowd of men and women swayed wildly. Seeing Clara Quinn frown, the smile on Ethan Reed's face disappeared. You don't like this place? No. Clara Quinn quickly shook her head. She simply wasn't used to such boisterousness. Having been in a quiet world for so long, the sudden noise made her feel a little uncomfortable. Ha! Ethan Reed chuckled lightly. His handsome appearance drew glances from women passing by. If it weren't for the great beauty, Clara Quinn, by his side, many women would likely have approached him, offering themselves. There will be a dance competition here tonight. Leaning closer so Clara Quinn could hear him over the noise, Ethan Reed whispered in her ear, his breath tickling her, sending shivers down her spine. Dance competition? A nostalgic look entered Clara Quinn's eyes. Back in university, she was the head of the dance club, but Ethan Reed led Clara Quinn by the hand to a quieter spot. The winner will receive a grand prize, Ethan Reed murmured in Clara's ear, tonight, my innocence is in your hands. What do you mean? Don't worry about what I mean. I remember you're a great dancer. Show me your talent tonight. After all that, Clara Quinn finally understood Ethan Reed's intention. It turned out he brought her here to participate in the competition. Clara Quinn pursed her lips. Ethan Reed had helped her with such a big favor. Just dancing, it shouldn't be a problem, right? The men and women on the dance floor dispersed towards the edges. Abruptly, a circular stage ascended from the dance floor, halting its climb at a height of 1 meter. Suddenly, a stunning beauty emerged from the staircase behind the circular platform. Her off-the-shoulder dress revealed smooth, rounded shoulders, while the tight skirt showcased her curves, hinting at the fullness of her breasts. This alluring outfit nearly caused several men present to have nosebleeds. She was a natural-born enchantress. Welcome, everyone, to Fallen Angel tonight. We'll be choosing our annual Fallen Angel. I wonder which lucky lady will earn the title. Now, let's welcome our first contestant, nominated by young Master Bray, Lindsay Lohan. As the words fell, a beauty in a midriff-bearing top emerged from the side. Her flat stomach revealed an incredible physique, and her ample bosom was equally impressive. Most importantly, she possessed a lovely doll-like face, an angelic visage paired with a devilish figure, offering men the ultimate indulgence. Hello, everyone, I'm Lindsay Lohan, and tonight I'll be bringing you. Suddenly, all the lights in the hall went out. Clara Quinn was about to scream, but a hand swiftly covered her mouth. As she struggled, Ethan Reed's voice whispered in her ear, "It's just a gimmick." Clara Quinn nodded, and Ethan Reed reluctantly removed his hand from her soft skin. The lights returned, now focused solely on the woman on the circular stage. A steel pole had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Clara Quinn watched, slightly stunned, as the woman on the pole moved with serpentine grace. Her body coiled and twisted with impressive skill. Confident you'll win? Ethan Reed glanced at Clara Quinn with a knowing look. Depends on your taste. Clara Quinn smiled confidently. She always had complete faith in her dancing. Ethan Reed's almond-shaped eyes flicked towards Clara Quinn. Her confidence had a unique allure. The closer he got to her, the more he discovered captivating qualities. His heart rate unconsciously quickened. Ethan Reed felt something within him subtly shifting. In a private room upstairs. Young Master Bray, Lindsay Lohan's waist is incredibly supple. She must be amazing in bed, eh? You're wrong this time. Lindsay Lohan is still a virgin. Young Master Bray, to have such a beauty by your side and not make a move, someone exclaimed in astonishment. Young Master Bray gave a cryptic smile, saying nothing. If he wanted women, would he lack them? This woman, he had specially prepared for someone else. Young Master Young, are you interested in Lindsay Lohan? Going once, going twice. Young Master Bray directed his gaze at Henry Young, who sat composedly opposite him. Henry Young swirled a glass of red wine, exuding an air of elegance, yet his posture was slightly reclined, appearing somewhat languid. To young Master Bray's offer, he glanced down indifferently. All right. I wonder how much young Master Young's all right is worth for Lindsay Lohan. Young Master Bray laughed heartily, a flicker of delight in his eyes. Henry Young shot a sideways glance at young Master Bray, only smiling without speaking. After Lindsay Lohan left the stage, the alluring beauty swayed her hips as she stepped onto the circular platform. Now everyone, start casting your votes for Lindsay Lohan. These will be considered as Miss Lindsay Lohan's value, and the highest bidder will get to enjoy a night with her. The tone shifted. Next, please welcome another contestant. Hearing this, Clara Quinn couldn't bear it any longer and turned to look at Ethan Reed. What does this mean? Don't worry, I'll buy you back. Seeing Clara Quinn's anger, Ethan Reed quickly explained. Hearing Ethan Reed's explanation, Clara Quinn's expression softened slightly, but still looked displeased. I don't want to participate in this competition. All right. Ethan Reed agreed without hesitation. The swift reply made Clara Quinn look at Ethan Reed with suspicion. Didn't you say earlier that if I didn't win, you'd lose your virginity tonight? I don't want to force you. Ethan Reed grinned, his words laced with a wicked intent that made Clara Quinn's heart flutter. Clara Quinn tilted her head, pursed her lips, and after a long while, said, Can you really buy me back? Yes, no matter how much it costs, I'll buy you back. Fine, I agree, but next time, I absolutely will not do such a shameful thing again. Clara Quinn emphasized, she was the young miss of the Quinn family, and no matter what, she had to maintain the Quinn family's reputation. Just this once. Then help me. No problem, leave this matter to me. Next, please welcome the contestant recommended by young Master Reed, Clara, to the stage. The beauty's sweet voice rang out. Clara Quinn, wearing the prepared dance costume, slowly began to walk onto the stage. Interrupting with a newsflash, young Master Young has purchased 500,000 votes for Lindsay Lohan. Hearing this voice, Clara Quinn's body stiffened involuntarily. Young Master Young. Henry Young. He was here. Clara Quinn's face immediately froze. Not satisfied with philandering with women outside, he was even buying women in a place like this. Clara Quinn felt a pang of pain in her heart, trying to swallow her tears as she took each step onto the stage. When Clara Quinn stepped onto the stage, everyone gasped. Who was that up there? Clara Quinn wore a traditional white cheongsam, her hair flowing loosely, like a proud snow plum blossom, standing in a quiet valley, blooming silently. Completely out of place in this decadent setting, she nevertheless evoked a strange sense of excitement. Looking at the greedy, admiring, envious, and possessive gazes, the first thing Clara Quinn did was tear the pristine white garment from her body. The entire hall erupted in cheers, because the moment the garment on her body was torn apart, the lights suddenly went out. When they came back on, she was wearing a tight-fitting black outfit that showed off her fiery figure, and whistles erupted from below. Clara Quinn smiled seductively, winding around the pole, performing a fiery dance. Inside the private room, young Master Bray, this woman is Lindsay Lohan's biggest rival, your Mr. Reed, because of a bet, seems to have revealed his hidden treasure, quite valuable indeed. Who is this woman? Uninterested in her, young Master Bray watched Henry Young stand, his face grim as he stared at the dancer below, his thoughts churning. At this moment, Henry Young gritted his teeth, watching Clara Quinn sway below, a storm brewing in his eyes. Hashtag Chapter 30. The leaked video the woman Ethan Reed put forward, how are they involved? The thought that Ethan Reed might have poached his wife flashed a dark look across Henry Young's eyes. Even though Ethan Reed was his close friend, a friend's wife was off limits. Although he didn't care about this wife, he wouldn't allow her to betray him and cause him to lose face. If Clara Quinn wasn't his wife, if Ethan Reed liked her, he would definitely give her up. Only, there are no ifs. Young Master Bray walked over to Henry Young and casually asked, do you know the woman down there? What's it to you? Rebuffed, young Master Bray gave a forced laugh and turned to leave, the stiffness in his face lingering. Henry Young called a waiter over, whispered a few words in his ear, and a bloodthirsty smile spread across his face. Clara Quinn, if she dared to betray him, she must have the courage to bear the consequences. Mr. Young. Henry Young's secretary approached him after receiving a call. What is it? Ethan Reed has taken care of Vivian Bloom's matter. After the secretary spoke, she could clearly feel the icy aura emanating from her boss. Being his secretary wasn't easy. The dance below reached its climax, and everyone present was captivated by Clara Quinn, as if they could feel the intense vitality in her movements. She was portraying her life, her descent from an angel into hell. A look of enchantment gradually filled Ethan Reed's eyes. He saw only Clara Quinn, his heart beating in time with her dance. Before anyone could fully savor it, her performance ended. Seeing the near-frenzied crowd, Ethan Reed quickly stepped forward, removed his jacket, and completely covered Clara Quinn's somewhat revealing attire, then escorted her to a prepared private room. Your dance tonight was exquisite. Admiration filled Ethan Reed's eyes. Thank you. Clara Quinn felt that this was the most spirited and genuine dance she had performed since she began studying the art. She had poured all her hidden bitterness and resentment into it. You were stunning tonight. A hint of affection flickered in Ethan Reed's eyes as he looked at Clara Quinn. Clara Quinn froze, sensing an undercurrent in Ethan Reed's words. Lowering her head slightly, her long, curled lashes trembled, concealing the emotions in her eyes. When she looked up again, her gaze was calm and still. When can I leave? Soon. A flicker of bitterness crossed Ethan Reed's eyes. The beauty before him was already taken, and by his close friend, no less. Just as Ethan Reed finished speaking, a commotion erupted outside. Tonight's highest voted girl is Clara, nominated by young Master Reed. The announcement was met with a burst of enthusiastic applause. So tonight, who will place the highest bid and take our beauty Clara home? Hearing this, Clara Quinn's body stiffened slightly. Seeing her like this, Ethan Reed comforted, "Don't worry. It is young Master Young." Hearing this name, both Clara Quinn's and Ethan Reed's bodies froze. Henry Young. Ethan Reed? Didn't you say, you would definitely buy me? Clara Quinn's voice held a trace of panic. Don't rush, I'll go check the situation. Wait for me here. With that, Ethan Reed immediately went outside, leaving Clara Quinn alone in the room. A moment later, the door suddenly opened. Clara Quinn anxiously looked towards the door. Had Ethan Reed handled everything? However, when that tall figure appeared before her, her whole body tensed. You. What about me? Henry Young walked in. Clara Quinn couldn't help but take a few steps back. What do you want? Oh. What do you think I want? Henry Young strode towards Clara Quinn, his hands tightly gripping her wrists. Let me go. Clara Quinn struggled to break free from Henry Young's grasp, but to no avail. Henry Young suddenly embraced Clara Quinn, his eyes filled with desire and anger. He had never imagined Clara Quinn could be so mesmerizingly alluring. Ripping off Ethan Reed's coat from Clara Quinn, Henry Young's hands groped her body. Next time, don't let me smell another man on you. You reek of other women every day. You can't even do it yourself, so why demand it of me? Clara Quinn immediately retorted. Henry Young's attitude made her feel like a toy, subject to his control. She didn't like his attitude. She wished he would treat her like a woman, like he did with Lily. Thinking of that name, Clara Quinn felt a pang of anguish. It clearly wasn't her fault, so why was she being blamed for everything? You are my wife, but I am not your husband. Henry Young looked at the vulnerable Clara Quinn before him, at her slightly parted red lips, and he unconsciously lowered his head and kissed them. His skillful tongue parted Clara Quinn's teeth, entwining with hers. Henry Young's movements were so gentle that Clara Quinn quickly became lost in the sensation, unable to extricate herself. She hated the man in front of her, but at the same time, she loved him deeply. Watching Clara Quinn gradually succumb to his tenderness, a cold glint flashed in Henry Young's eyes. Hearing the sound of the door opening and closing, a triumphant look flickered across his face. No matter what Ethan Reed's intentions were with Clara Quinn, he couldn't allow their affair to continue developing. Ethan Reed stood outside the door, his eyes gloomy. What could he do about the scene he had just witnessed? Burst in and snatch Clara Quinn from Henry Young's grasp. Clara Quinn was Henry Young's legal wife. What right did he have? The disappointment in his eyes was unconcealable. His heart shattered into pieces. The night he realized his feelings was also the night of his heartbreak. They spent the entire night entangled in each other's embrace. The next morning, when Clara Quinn awoke, Henry Young was no longer beside her. A flicker of joy crossed her eyes. It had been the gentlest, most harmonious night they'd shared since their marriage. Could it be that he was finally accepting her as his wife? Clara Quinn cheerfully got ready and drove to the company. Only. Clara Quinn distinctly sensed something strange in the atmosphere. Several people were pointing and whispering in her direction. As soon as she stepped into the company, a grim-faced Martin Hayes pulled her into his office. Take a look at this. Following Martin Hayes's gesture, Clara Quinn saw the computer screen displaying footage of her dancing at the Fallen Angel bar the previous night. Most importantly, the price tag attached to the footage stabbed directly at her heart. Wasn't everything that happened within the Fallen Angel bar supposed to remain confidential? Clara Quinn couldn't bear to imagine what acquaintances would think upon seeing this, let alone how her father would react. This morning, someone posted this on the front page of major websites. Whoever did this clearly has malicious intent. Martin Hayes's icy tone resonated within Clara Quinn's mind. Indeed. It was undoubtedly malicious. For another woman, this video might be a path to notoriety, but for someone of her standing, it would only become fodder for ridicule. She recalled the slight improvement in her relationship with Henry Young just yesterday. How would he react if he saw this? Martin Hayes, what should I do? I don't know, who took you there? Martin Hayes asked in a low voice. His first instinct was to suspect Henry Young, but without proof, he couldn't make accusations. It was, Martin Hayes's question jolted Clara Quinn's memory. Ethan Reed had taken her last night. But Ethan Reed had just helped her, would he betray her like this? Who was it? A friend. He wouldn't harm me. I'll ask him. Clara Quinn glanced at Martin Hayes, then grabbed her phone and turned to call Ethan Reed. Hello, a husky voice answered. Ethan Reed, it's me, Clara Quinn. Clara? The voice on the other end brightened considerably. What's up? Are you aware of the video of me dancing last night circulating on major websites? Clara Quinn hesitated briefly before voicing her suspicion. She couldn't believe Ethan Reed would do such a thing. What? Ethan Reed's voice sharpened. The Fallen Angel bar forbade any unauthorized recordings. Only a select few had the privilege to film inside. Clara, wait for me. I'll give you an explanation. Leave the video to me. With that, Ethan Reed hung up. Why were you at the bar with Ethan Reed last night? Martin Hayes asked, his brow furrowed. He held no fondness for someone like Ethan Reed. Clara associating with such a playboy could only lead to trouble. Because he helped me with something important. Why didn't you come to me? Martin Hayes countered. He had told her he was there for her, did she not take his words to heart? You couldn't have helped with this. Clara Quinn shook her head. Yes, I can't help you. A flicker of loss shadowed Martin Hayes's eyes. Martin Hayes, that's not what I meant. Clara Quinn hastily explained. You're telling the truth, I'm not angry. Hearing this, Clara Quinn glanced at Martin Hayes, seeing his indifferent expression, her heart relaxed slightly. Martin Hayes wasn't a petty man. Only, Clara Quinn forgot one thing, sometimes, in front of the person they like, people always say the opposite of what they feel. Martin Hayes, I have to go home for a while regarding the company matter you entrusted to me. Clara Quinn thought of her parents. If she didn't go home now and explain everything clearly, she feared something big would happen. Martin Hayes watched Clara Quinn's retreating back, silently vowing to himself, he must become strong. Because only with strength could he protect her. Chapter 31 Arrested for assault at this moment, at the Quinn family residence. Father, do you know what your good daughter has done? Marcus Quinn excitedly walked up to Christopher Quinn, a barely concealed smugness in his eyes. You're speaking ill of your sister again. Christopher Quinn frowned at Marcus Quinn disapprovingly, a hint of regret in his eyes. If Marcus Quinn were even slightly useful, would he have to toil so hard for the company until now? Yet, his talented daughter, for the sake of a man, was unwilling to shoulder the family business. What sins had he committed in a past life? Where? Father, you'll see when you look. Having said that, Marcus Quinn directly placed the computer in front of Christopher Quinn. This is. Christopher Quinn saw what was playing on the computer. It was an image of Clara Quinn dancing in a decadent bar. Watching the subsequent scene unfold, Christopher Quinn felt something erupt from the depths of his being. "Father, I may be a bit wild sometimes, but I've never caused such a big incident. This Clara, she's truly gone too far." Marcus Quinn added fuel to the fire. He had worked hard to grasp Clara Quinn's weakness, how could he not exploit it quickly? Christopher Quinn's face changed upon hearing Marcus Quinn's words. He immediately roared, "Tell your sister to get back here." As soon as his voice fell, Clara Quinn's voice came from outside, and then her figure appeared before the two men. Clara Quinn saw Marcus Quinn, a premonition flashing in her eyes. This brother of hers had always been against her. "Father, no need to call her. She's come back to confess her guilt herself." Seeing Clara Quinn, Marcus Quinn became even more gleeful. Before, it was always Clara Quinn who witnessed him being disciplined in an embarrassing manner. Now, the tables had turned. Today, it was his turn to watch Clara Quinn's misfortune. Clara Quinn glared hatefully at Marcus Quinn. How could she have such a brother? Is the woman in this the you? Christopher Quinn's first question upon seeing Clara Quinn was an interrogation. "Father." Clara Quinn tried to explain, but all the words that reached her lips turned into nothingness because she simply had no way to explain. "Don't call me father. I don't have a daughter who corrupts public morals like you." Christopher Quinn said angrily, "If Marcus hadn't told me today, I wouldn't have known you were causing such chaos outside. A few days ago, you angered the people of Thunderbolt, and now you've done such a despicable thing. Is this how I raised you?" "Dad, please let me explain." "No more explanations. You're the one in that video." Marcus Quinn interrupted, deliberately denying Clara Quinn any chance to justify herself. "Drop everything you're doing and come help me at the company." "Dad. You think you can disregard your father now that you're married, don't you?" Christopher Quinn glared at Clara Quinn, giving her no room for refusal. "Dad, my workshop just opened. I can't leave it now. It's just a small workshop. How can it compare to Quinn Enterprises? I won't give up." Clara Quinn, initially intending to persuade Christopher Quinn, now stood firm. She loved her father, but sometimes couldn't agree with his methods, like when he ignored her pleas or tried to control her life. She had worked so hard to finally achieve something, how could she give it up so easily? Are you defying me?" Christopher Quinn clutched his chest, furious. "Whether you agree or not, I won't return to Quinn Enterprises." "Dad, please don't be angry. If you're upset, I'll leave." With that, Clara Quinn stormed out the door. Watching Clara Quinn's hastily retreating figure, Christopher Quinn sat down, clutching his chest, his heart heavy with unease. Gasp, gasp. Clara Quinn, breathing heavily, realized she had run quite a distance from the Quinn family villa. Looking around the upscale neighborhood, she frowned. No taxis. And she didn't want to return to the Quinn residence right now. So, Clara Quinn walked along the road, seeking a moment of peace. She hadn't gone far when a car screeched to a halt beside her. Well, if it isn't Miss Quinn. I thought I was seeing a ghost wandering around here at this hour." A lewd voice chuckled beside her ear. Clara Quinn recognized Marcus Quinn's sleazy friend, the one who had tried to assault her before. "Get lost." Panic seized Clara Quinn. Alone in this deserted area, what could she do if he tried something? She was utterly defenseless. Rummaging through her purse, she found a small fruit knife. Gripping it tightly, she glared at the man. "Don't be shy, Miss Quinn. Let's finish what we started last time. No one will interrupt us now." As he spoke, he lunged at Clara Quinn, grabbing her. "Let me go." Clara Quinn struggled in his grasp, her eyes filled with terror, suddenly regretting running off alone. The man said nothing, pressing his face against hers, inhaling deeply. "You smell so good," he breathed, his voice thick with lust. "If you don't let go, I won't be so polite." Clara Quinn's hand trembled around the knife. She was afraid, but more afraid of being violated by this beast. "What are you going to do, Ak?" Just as he moved to advance, a sharp pain pierced his abdomen. He looked down to see a fruit knife embedded in his gut. He glared at Clara Quinn, his face contorted with rage. You dared to injure me." "No, I didn't mean to." Clara Quinn unconsciously stepped back, the fruit knife having slipped from her grasp unnoticed. Police station. Clara Quinn nervously endured the police interrogation. "Do you have anything else to add?" The officer recounted the incident, allowing Clara Quinn to confirm. After listening, she shook her head. "All right, I'll report the specifics. You can call your family to bail you out now." The officer left, leaving Clara Quinn alone in the interrogation room. Clara Quinn curled up, clutching her phone, hesitant. Who should she call for help? Her finger unconsciously scrolled through her contacts, finally stopping at Henry. No matter what happened, he was the first person she thought of. But Clara Quinn wasn't sure if Henry Young would come to her rescue. Without further thought, she dialed his number. "Hello, who is this?" A seductive voice answered. "Who are you?" Clara Quinn gritted her teeth. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" The seductive voice held a hint of indifference and a subtle smugness. Just as Clara Quinn was about to speak, Henry Young's voice came from the other end. "Who is it?" Clara Quinn's eyes darkened. Could Henry Young really not be without a woman by his side?